Tom,
No.
while we're lucky enough to have you here, I want to thank you personally for providing Roddy McDowall with maybe his last great genre role, if not his last great role, because we all love him
So much.
He was a huge influence on all of us, and this was the perfect role for him.
Yeah,
it really was.
At that stage in his career.
Every element of it too.
I wish he was still around.
Yeah, we all do.
Well, I mean, he had two. I don't. You never know what you can say these days. He had two sit-down dinners a week. He had a couple who lived with him, and basically it was the cook and the
butler.
The butler, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
They were a married couple, but what they did is they cooked for him 2 nights a week, and one night was all the straight people. And the other night was all gay.
Which night was the food better?
I never made it to the but what Roddy had, Roddy shared his with me anyway, because I'm a fan. I mean, basically, I'm like you guys. I mean. Except my love has taken me into spending my life doing this, but I would just sit gaga with and listening to Roddy's stories and all the mistakes I made, the props I didn't keep, the autographs I didn't get. I had dinner at Roddy's with Vincent Price and Vincent's wife.
No.
Yes, and Vincent was failing. Vincent was failing.
Yeah.
I mean, I had wanted to cast him initially in Fright Night.
Yeah.
And his health wasn't good enough.
Now,
And on top of that, he was good friends with Roddy.
Yeah.
and Roddy really wanted that part. Roddy read that and said, But I mean, I just met so many people. Elizabeth Taylor. I could go on. Philip Dunn, the people who were still left from the studio system had been huge. I mean, they were the people that admired Joe Mankiewicz.
Mm-hmm.
They were the people that George Stevens was the greatest director.
Right.
I mean, their value system and their sense of film was so different than ours, as I'm sure if we had a millennial here, they'd be talking about paranormal and found footage.
That's one of Sean's favorite, isn't it? Yeah.
But I mean, Lauren Pelly's a lovely human being. I don't know Blumhouse, but Oren's a great guy. Well, anyway, I mean, what Roddy did was Roddy passed on the accumulated knowledge of the previous generations, because he was that guy out of Mad Max who kept the verbal historical record. He was the guy who would sit down and could talk for 3 hours about being in children's school at Fox and at MGM when his best friend was Elizabeth Taylor.
So cool.
And he said the most beautiful woman he had ever seen was the actress in Magnificent Amber.
Maggot Amberson?
No.
Magnificent Obsession?
Huh?
Magnificent Obsession?
No, it has Amber, and it was a huge hit, and it has Amber in the title. And she died in the fire in Chicago horribly. And she was the most beautiful actress that Roddy said the most beautiful.
Forever Amber?
Yes.
Wow.
Forever Amber, whoever the lead of that is.
Oh, Sean.
Dig in your memory, Sean.
Linda Darnell?
Yes.
Oh.
Cool.
Roddy said Linda Darnell was much more beautiful than Elizabeth Taylor.
No, I find that hard to believe.
Well,
no, Elizabeth Taylor had 2 sets of eyelashes, She did. And she was... And you heard the
But
thing,
I have that too.
and you know what Richard Burton said about, like volcanoes. Come on. She's gorgeous.
Can't we all be winners? That's what I'm saying.
But that's who Roddy said he thought was the most beautiful woman.
well, yeah, I mean, but I had another amazing experience with him. MGM was closing down finally. This is where you get confused. They had all these wonderful obituaries for Kirk Kerkorian destroyed MGM.
Yes, he did.
He was a rug merchant. He was a destroyer of tradition.
The destroyer of companies, basically.
Destroyer of companies.
It's like sell it off. You know,
horrible.
He destroyed something so great.
Destroyed the best, and the biggest, the most prestigious, and the biggest studio in Hollywood. He destroyed MGM. He gutted it, and he gutted it 3 times. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Laddie was, I guess Laddie was the last guy there, and they had sold off the lot to Sony,
mm-hmm.
and
this is Alan Ladd Jr.
Yeah, and Roddy and I were walking the lot,
mm-hmm.
and Roddy would point to this or that studio,
mm-hmm.
this or that dressing room,
yeah.
and tell me who had been in there,
mm-hmm.
tell me who had had an affair over there.
Really?
Wow.
He pointed out to me at the back of the Thalberg building,
yeah.
where Katharine Hepburn met Spencer Tracy for the first time.
Wow.
He carried that kind of knowledge.
Wow.
It was the knowledge of, and then we walked down, because the MGM then, probably still, had all these heating tunnels under that were built that you could walk through,
mm-hmm.
because you'd get down there and you could repair the gas lines and the electrical line.
Yeah.
And they had taken all their nitrate film and they had it down in these tunnels. And even when we walked through the place, which must have been 85, 86, 87, the nitrate prints were still there.
Really?
Wow.
And then we went into the research library at MGM, and the librarian was seated at a table crying because everything was being thrown out. They weren't even, all the research books, all the stills of all the stars, and I should have just loaded up the car.
Yeah.
And I was just too dumb, you know. But so that was the kind of education I got from Roddy.
Yeah.
But he could walk past the sound stages because he'd been in the children's school. He'd been there since he was 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
And he could point out what stages, what movies were made on,
mm-hmm.
and he could tell you where Judy Garland's, you know, and where they had their tryst,
mm-hmm.
you know, because if you screwed somebody, it went immediately throughout the lot.
Matt knows how much I love Judy Garland, so it's on another podcast.
That's amazing.
So Roddy had an aesthetic, but Roddy also worked and got as much work as he did, because in a sense he was a professional friend.
Mm-hmm.
He had everybody who was anybody over at one time or another,
mm-hmm.
and the friendship was quite often repaid with jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I met Henry King, the directed a Western that Roddy did back in the 60s or the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, great credits, detective story. Lee Remick when she was dying.
Yeah.
The Brit who directed Darling and Marathon Man.
Schlesinger?
Yeah,
John
Schlesinger. I had dinner with him.
Wow.
One of the most hysterical evenings I had was Grumpy Old Men.
Yeah. Walter Matthau.
Walter Matthau, who was there with his wife. Now, was Coral Brown Vincent Price's wife, or
Carla?
Coral Brown was Vincent Price.
Price's wife.
Okay. So Coral was Vincent Price's. Walter Matthau's wife was one of 3 teenage beauties, probably in the late 40s, and all 3 of them made a promise to each other that they would all marry rich older men.
Damn.
One of them was Walter Matthau's wife, and I think she married like the violinist, Sikorsky, or I can't remember the names, whatever. The other one was Una O'Neill, and she married Chaplin.
Oh.
The mother. And then Walter Matthau's. Oh, and the other one was Vanderbilt.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah,
Wow.
she was the mother of the guy on CNN.
Anderson Cooper.
Emerson Cooper, that's right.
Oh my gosh, it's come full circle.
So
Very similar to how I approached life with who I was going to marry.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to marry someone who will take care of me and my lavish lifestyle.
But that story was told to me by Walter Matthau's wife, whose name right now I can't remember. So I mean, I just had a. I just say, since I was into film and I read film criticism books and
yeah.
Sorry,
It's okay. I had to do it at school, so yeah.
Well, we're all the same thing. The idea of that you're sitting in that situation. Is there those moments where you kind of like check in with yourself?
Yeah.
And you go, is this really happening?
Yeah.
I am living the dream.
Yeah.
And then Dennis Hopper. And Dennis was finally straight. He was off of all drugs, and he was as mean as a snake.
Really?
Oh God!
Wow.
We say nasty things.
Well, no, he was just edgy.
Really?
He was edgy, like he was still on coke or something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But I mean that was he was a jumpy personality.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah. Well, he had towards the end. I mean, he actually had a really good career. With a lot of
Towards the end.
Towards the end, actually, Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
I always wonder though if, like, to borrow a phrase from my friend comedian Rick Overton,
Yeah.
if maybe he should have gone just warm turkey.
There was a story, and I asked Dennis about it, and he actually didn't want to talk about it, but he was making a Western with John Wayne, and it may be the Sons of Katie Elder.
Or is that a Red River?
No.
Sons of Katie Elder?
I think so. I think
Trust
so.
you guys.
Was not Red River.
No.
Who's the director?
Of Sons of Katie River?
Yeah, Katie Elder.
Katie Elder.
Sons of Red Elder.
Henry Hathaway?
Henry Hathaway.
Hathaway.
Excuse me, that's who it was. Henry Hathaway. Henry Hathaway you did not screw around with. Hathaway wanted a line read a certain way, and Dennis would not do it.
Oh, that's right. This famous story.
And
He
this-
went on
this
for
story.
hours.
For hours.
Yeah.
For hours.
That's right.
And at the end of it, I don't know if Hathaway was a very strong guy. I met him at Roddy's house too. But I mean, he was he was a tough,
Strong-willed.
old. Oh God, yeah. Those guys in those days, they weren't about any of this art crap. Well, no, they considered themselves skilled tradesmen.
Oh.
They art. Go look at a John Ford interview.
Yeah.
The word artist is with his teeth the same way. Anyway, he spent all day on one line
With Dennis Hopper. trying
with
to get him
Dennis
to say the
Hopper,
scene.
and Hopper wouldn't give it to him, and Hathaway would not stop, and it was 300-400 takes, and at that point, Dennis didn't work for 12 years.
Wow. Right,
Wow.
That's crazy.
Who got the last laugh there, though?
Yeah. Hey,
Exactly.
art, I think, won.
Yeah. But then Dennis, after the success, which I think was probably totally inadvertent, of
Easy
Easy Rider,
Yeah.
went off with Stewart's script. And Stewart and Joe Sargent were the two best screenwriters in Hollywood for character. He went off with Stuart Stern's screenplay to Peru, at which they all went up from the mountains and got outrageously stoned and driven.
I remember this story.
and he totally trashed Stewart's script. And Stewart had written it with Dennis on spec, off of their relationship out of east of not East of Eden, but
Rebel?
Rebel
Without
Without a Cause.
The Rebel Without a Cause, and Stewart never forgave Dennis.
Wow.
And I mean, Stewart would not sit with Dennis on a panel.
Wow.
And these guys have been friends since like 1950 or something.
Was that the script for the last movie? Or?
Yes, the last movie was
Right,
written by
right.
Stuart Stern,
Wow.
but Dennis didn't shoot it, and Dennis wasn't coherent enough. And then Dennis took all of his money, went down to Taos, bought a ranch that if he still had it would be worth $50 million, and proceeded to spend like 2 or 3 years trying to cut the last
movie.
Last movie
together.
Almost his last movie. Life imitates art.
And could not do it. So you had these cascading stories going on from these people that I met, and at the same time I'm working and I'm writing scripts.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time I'm enthralled. But
and I assume that Roddy McDowall was great to work with on Fright Night too. I mean, was he just jump into the role, and was it an easy task to direct him?
Yes. I mean, I wish I could say I did it all for Roddy. But, no, but Roddy took the image of the Cowardly Lion.
Yeah.
From the Wizard of Oz.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And he went, and what Roddy did was Roddy became like I don't want to say like a father, but like an uncle to the cast, except for Stephen Jeffries, whom he hated.
Really?
Yeah, you'd have.
Here we gotta go. Let's get some stories.
You'd have to talk to Stephen about it. I don't know. They had that scene where Stephen attacks him in Roddy's apartment, and Roddy burns his forehead with the cross.
Great scene.
And Roddy became outraged, and came to me complaining that Stephen wasn't being professional because he wasn't following the fight as blocked out by the the stunt coordinator. And so I didn't know what the hell was going on,
right.
So anyway, I think I should be kind and keep my mouth shut.
No, you can't go this far without my pins and needles here.
Well, ultimately the scene turned out great though.
Yeah.
I go to Stephen and I say, don't pull him around so hard, maybe, huh? And Stephen says to me, well, the old queen wants to go to bed with me, and I wouldn't do it.
Wow.
He should be flattered.
Really.
Yes, he should. But it's funny, that whole scene, that sequence is really, really cool. When he gets the cross burned on him and stuff.
Great.
And because he gives this howl, I can't even do it. It's such a high pitched howl,
and that's one of the things that really stands out.
Steven,
really talented actor.
He was great. He's great.
Like a breakout role.
And that's what's wonderful. For example, that character, which is there's a wonderful balance of humor and horror in that movie.
That was the only bump in the entire movie.
Really? That's filming that scene.
Yes. And for whatever reason, there was antagonism, but it was on Roddy's part.
Right.
Yeah. But those characters. And that's one of the things that we've talked about with horror comedy, and that the idea that you any horror movie,
you can cut that out if you want to.
No, I'm staying in.
Unless you want it cut out, that's a different thing. But the idea that in horror comedy, the best horror comedies are the ones where they play the horror straight.
The characters are genuinely scared.
You can't break the third wall. I mean, what happens, and this was a complaint of mine back then. I think you have less and less of a problem now because horror is exploding. It seems to me. I mean, here we are doing a show about it.
Yeah.
But the genre is exploding. But back then, it really was more of the ugly stepchild. But what was the question again?
Horror comedy playing the horror straight.
Yes, well, you have to. Back then, what was going on was that so many people were ashamed of having to do it. And you especially had writers and directors looking down on it. And so you would get movies where they would be nudge, wink, wink.
Look how funny and silly we are.
Yes, but I'm not I can do better than this, and I'm not taking it seriously either.
Right.
And what that did is absolutely killed it.
Absolutely.
And I've always objected to that, and I refused to do it. And the reality of the situation, I played it straight all the way through Fright Night, which is why it works. Because if you're going to go and see a story and see a movie, you want to identify with it and get inside the movie.
Yeah,
and that also applies to Child's Play.
One thing one thing I really love is when they show a scene of a movie with Peter Vincent. There's like little clips, and it looks. I don't know if you shot it on 16mm or something in the movie. It's and there's this shot of Roddy McDowall. He starts to like hammer
deliberate,
and he's hammering the stake, and then he looks so serious, and then the spurt of blood goes in his face, and you can tell that he's He's a bit irritated, so this is when he tries to stay in character. It's like
but playing
it totally straight.
straight.
Every time I see it, I just start busting up. I love that scene.
Look at it again, because what you'll see is the steak is upside down. He's pounding.
Did you do that deliberately?
Yes. Because that's how bad it was.
Oh my god!
When I was watching them as a kid.
That's so awesome. I love that scene.
That was deliberate.